Good morning, my fellow Canadians. Today's topic, let's ban handguns. Mayor Tory in Toronto, that spineless weasel, we have to look seriously at a handgun ban. All the evidence, logical evidence, objective evidence, shows that what he proposes is, I think, petty politicking, because anybody with a brain, anybody who knows firearms, knows that what a handgun ban will accomplish is absolutely nothing. Now, the anti-handgun bias and anti-gun bias is being fed by the mainstream media. The Liberals have always been anti-firearm. This is a given. The NDP, much the same. The Conservatives seem to be the only ones, and the Libertarians, who seem to be the only ones who understand what the real problem is. And the real problem is criminal misuse of firearms. Criminal misuse of firearms. Anybody who wants to look at the statistics will find that the vast majority of charges laid under the Firearms Act have been administrative. In other words, someone forgot to renew their firearms license. Someone forgot to put a trigger lock on a firearm. It's this stupid. There was one of the shooting clubs outside of Toronto. There was a police officer waiting there and pulling members as they exited, pulling them over and checking if they have a restricted firearm. Is it in a locked case, and is it locked? If it's a non-restricted, is it for sure empty? Do you have a valid license? Checking the date. This is just harassment. The legal firearms community is one of the most responsible, heavily checked, heavily vetted sports groups in all of Canada, if not the world. Okay? So these little harassment charges accomplish nothing. But it is this stupid. Under the law, let's say you were at the range, you've got your handgun in a locked pistol case, trigger locked like you're supposed to have. You're driving home, you have to take a whiz, so you stop at Tim Hortons and run in, get a coffee and a donut, take a whiz. Technically, you've broken the law because you're supposed to transport it the most direct route home and no stops. Now, if a police officer had been following this guy and saw the guy leave his vehicle unattended, bang, charges. And the reaction is way over the top. You broke the law, we're taking all of your firearms, confiscating them all, pending the result of your hearing. Now, is this draconian? Is this unreasonable? Is this really unfair vilification and targeting, dare I say, of a specific group? Absolutely. The vast majority of, almost invariably, the anti-firearms rhetoric I hear, both from politicians or individuals, is based on lack of knowledge. They don't understand firearms, and they don't talk to people who know firearms, and misinformation from the mainstream media. Now, I've said this in previous posts. If you're going to tear apart an institution, you're going to tear apart a process, you're going to critique something that exists, a mechanism, a vehicle, a whatever, okay, you should have something viable to propose in its place. So whether you're whether you're pro-firearm, anti-firearm, I'd ask that you hear me out. There are two primary problems facing Metro Police and this recent explosion in firearms crime. Gangs. That simple. Gang related. Retaliatory shootings and stupidity shootings. Now, if I had the power, if I could wave a magic wand and I had the power to enact intelligent firearms legislation, let me tell you what I would propose. And Mayor Tory, you might consider this before you start spouting off like an idiot. The big problem, and it was in the Toronto Sun, over 300 criminals are out on bail on handgun offenses or firearms offenses. Over 300 out on bail. Now, criminal, by their very nature, ignore the law. Well, we're going to grant you bail. You have a firearms prohibition. You cannot own a firearm and you cannot associate with other gang members. Oh, that's a deterrent. Like, yes, they get out of jail. In fact, there was just one caught recently. He's on probation for firearms offenses. He's on bail for other firearms offenses, and he was caught with a firearm. But, but he was given a prohibition. Oh my Lord! He violated the law again and again and again and again. They just don't get it. You have this moronic judiciary. Well, we're going to grant bail. And the cops are frustrated as hell. What do? When you've gone through the whole trouble of catching a guy in flagrante delicto, caught him with a firearm, and before you've done the paperwork, the little son of a bitch is out on bail again and committing more offenses. Like I said, if I had a magic wand, here's what I would propose. If you are arrested with the criminal use of a firearm, violent criminal use of a firearm, so that means commission of a robbery, shooting at a rival gangbanger, shooting up a neighborhood. If you are arrested, you go into jail, no bail. Bail is automatically denied. Judge doesn't even have to say we are not going to entertain bail. No bail. You go into jail and you are kept in jail until your trial. Second thing I would do, no credit for time served. It's a 1-for-1. If you go into jail, if you wait 6 months for your trial, you get a 10-year sentence, then you are given credit for half a year incarceration. 1-for-1. No 2-for-1, no 3-for-1. You are credited 1-for-1 only. They've tried mandatory minimum, and a judge threw it out. And the case that he used was a valid one. It was a dumb kid posing on Facebook with a firearm, and that was a firearms offense. And they fought, and the judge struck down the mandatory minimum. I think the law was badly worded on that, and this is where you need an expert in jurisprudence to have the law clearly written. If you are caught with the violent criminal use of a firearm, and the reason I put violent is because criminal use of a firearm is what that guy did. He had an unregistered fire. He had a firearm for which he was not entitled. So that is criminal use of a firearm. That is criminal possession of a firearm. Your license has lapsed, and you forgot, you were away, you were sick. You are now a criminal because you no longer have a valid firearms license. Now, Harper put in a 6-month grace period. I believe it was 6 months to renew your license, sell your firearms, or hand them over to the police for destruction. So you had that grace period. They could not come and just arbitrarily take your firearms because your firearms license had lapsed. So let's try this. Criminal use of a firearm, or violent criminal use of a firearm. So robbery, rape, shooting, no bail. You go into the system. None of this prohibition, no bail, nothing. You are in the system until your trial. That would be a big plus. Mandatory minimum, the law written clearly that violent use of a firearm during the commission of a violent crime is an automatic 5 years. Now, I've heard 10 years. I would put 5 years. So what I'm saying is you're arrested, you attempted a robbery, you have automatically 5 years, full 5 years, no credit for time served. You do 5 years. You're banged away for 5 years. If you're given another 4 years for the robbery, you have 9 years. Now, at 4 years, they can do that halfway, whatever the stupidity is. Corrections Canada gives these guys bail or parole after that. But the 5-year bit, that is not negotiable. You will do a minimum full 5 years. One of the reasons I bring this up is retaliatory shootings. The problem with putting these gangbangers out on bail is witnesses who would otherwise come forward won't. The code of silence within the community, within the gangbanging community, and I read it time and time and time again. The victim is not cooperating with police. The individual is not cooperating with police. There are no witnesses who are coming forward. No, of course not. Because the way the law is, you've got these guys on the streets. If Joe Citizen walks out and says, yeah, I saw the whole thing and this little son of a bitch shot somebody, his life, his family's life is now in danger because that SOB is now walking the streets free to commit more firearms crimes. And now you just made yourself a target. So, yeah, they're not going to cooperate with police. Tip lines? I don't know if they still do it, but if you are called to testify and they ask you, is your name so and so, and do you live at such and such? You say yes. All the gangbangers' buddies in the court gallery, that's the target. That's the guy we're going to get for doing testimony, for ratting. What is that? Snitches get stitches. So the way the system is geared, targeting legal handgun owners and a firearms ban will accomplish absolutely nothing. The firearms community keeps, like, it's like speaking into a black hole. It just doesn't seem to register or resonate with the Canadian public. Bans only affect the legal firearm owners. Criminals, because they are criminals, just ignore more laws. Enact all the legislation you want. They will just ignore them because they are criminals. They are breaking the law, so you give them more laws to break. You're not going to accomplish anything in terms of a deterrent. Deterrent must be real and must be painful. Then it becomes a deterrent. So you take Joe Gangbanger off the street. He knows he's been caught with a firearm during the commission of a violent crime. He knows he's got a minimum of 5 years he's going to do. And if they give him, let's say, attempted murder, they give him another 10 years or 12 years for attempted murder. He has got that minimum of 5 years, and even with half time served on another 10 years, he's going to be gone for 10 years. Will he be rehabilitated? I don't know, and I don't care, because the big thing is he will be off the streets and no longer in a position to harm innocent people or even possess and use a firearm. It's that simple. Make it a deterrent. You start doing this, the police would be happy as hell to see these people off the streets, and you would make the streets overall safer. People would be able to come forward with the knowledge. If you get sweeps and you clean out the whole gang, people can come forward and take back their streets. Good people, working people who are now terrorized into silence. The other thing, the right to defend your home, the right to defend your life with a firearm if you are menaced with a firearm. Castle doctrine and self-defense doctrine. There's myself, I know a lot of people, ex-soldiers, ex-cops, who know how to use firearms properly. People who've been properly trained in defensive use of a firearm. If you lived in a high crime area or a high risk area and you were allowed concealed carry, you bet the crime rate would drop, especially against the innocent. I spoke about this in a previous post. The number of potential mass shootings that have been stopped by a good citizen with a gun is far more than I had even initially suspected. Now, it's in the US, but if we had the provision here for good, responsible citizens to be able to defend themselves, not vigilantism, not taking the law into your own hands, not hunting down people, to defend your home, defend your neighborhood. This should be a right. And I would love to see that enshrined in Canadian law. Now, of course, the do-gooders are going to scream, "We're going to have the Wild West all over again. Ooh, blood in the streets. Ooh." And I've heard this rhetoric. I thought, my God, are you so disconnected from real life, from the real world? But again, one of my favorite rants is about reality versus theory and how out of touch a lot of these people are with the real world. So what I'm asking for is a little bit of common sense. to Mayor Tory and to Toronto City Council. If you want to do something effective about firearms, start looking at enacting legislation with some teeth. Start supporting the cops. Lobby the federal government for more money for guns and gangs task forces. Start making serious funds available for snitches with the guarantee of anonymity. If they are guaranteed anonymity, their names will never be known. They will not become targets, retaliatory targets. They have to be guaranteed anonymity. If you catch a guy on probation with an illegal firearm, you don't need a witness to come forward and testify. He's already broken the law. You have your charges and you make the penalties stiff enough. By God, you will see the firearm crime rate in Toronto plummet. So if you want to do something effective, do that. So my fellow Canadians, and especially my fellow Torontonians, give it some thought. Any feedback, any further suggestions that would reduce firearm crime, I'd love to hear them. I really would. But for now, have a good day.